Welcome everyone to today's Seriti Talks. I hope you're as excited as I am about it because I'm certain that I'm going to learn a little bit more than what I think I know about food insecurity and food waste. But before we continue, let me welcome the speakers, today's panelists. We have Harmony Koza. We have Simone. Harmony Koza is from Seriti Institute. He's the Assistant Program Manager for Community Response. And then we have Simone Smith, who is the head of exploration at the United Nations Development Program Accelerator Lab. And then we have Andy Duplessis from Food Forward South Africa, who is the managing director there. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Rafael.
All right. Andy, if you're ready, then we can just move on onto the presentation.
Excellent. Thank you very much to the Seriti Institute for allowing me to share a bit about our work. I won't be very long, and I'm happy to hand back to Rafael afterwards to moderate discussions further. So, just nod if you can see my screen.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, good. So I think let's start with a common definition of what is food insecurity. This is a definition that is commonly used by the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. And I think it's fitting to start off with that. So when all people at all times have physical, social, and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food that meets their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy lifestyle. So that just frames our context. However, in South Africa, roughly 1/3 of all food that is produced in South Africa ends up in landfill, while more than 30 million people are food insecure at this time. According to various studies, roughly half of that population of 30 million are food insecure all of the time throughout the month, and another 50% are food insecure halfway through the month. So we have quite a difficult situation that we have to cope with. So what are the reasons for this food waste? Overproduction, over-ordering, incorrectly labeled goods, date labeling issues, short-dated products, damaged goods, errors in the manufacturing, packaging, and logistics phases. So what Food Forward South Africa does is we connect this world of surplus, where the food is, to this world of need by recovering edible surplus food. And we work with farmers, manufacturers, wholesalers, and retailers. And the model we implement is called food banking. And this is roughly a graphic description of what we do. On the left-hand side of the equation, we get food from farmers when they have services while they're harvesting, manufacturers or pack houses, wholesalers and retailers, distribution centers, as well as at stores. And I'll talk further a bit about that. We operate in all 9 provinces. We've got warehouses in 7 of the locations, and 2 we service remotely, but we'll be opening 2 branches in the Northern Cape and Mpumalanga shortly. I'll just give you a brief idea of what programs we are able to address because of the surplus food that we're able to recover. So our main program is what we call warehouse food banking. This is where our trucks would go to a farmer's farm while he's harvesting, or to a manufacturer's plant or a retailer's distribution center, and we'd collect whatever surpluses they have available there. And I'll talk more about the quality of the surplus food in a minute or two. The second program we run is a digital platform called Food Share. And what this allows us to do is connect beneficiary organizations to our participating retail stores, of which Pick n Pay, Woolworths, Food Lovers Market, and Massmart participate. And within a 5-kilometer radius of where those stores are, we are able to connect one of our beneficiary organizations to be able to recover surplus food at those stores. We also operate a program called Second Harvest, and this is a direct outreach program to farmers where while they're harvesting for example, when they are harvesting beautiful tomatoes, but along with the beautiful tomatoes are out of spec tomatoes. We take those surpluses, the ugly fruit and vegetables, and we use that to feed people. Perfect product. It's not rotten. It's good for human consumption. So we work with farmers and farmer associations like Agri SA, the Citrus Growers Association, Nedbank Agri, and Standard Bank Agri's One Farm Share platform. Then, because our warehouses are concentrated in urban centers, we often provide, there's often a bias towards supporting nonprofit organizations with food that are in those urban centers. So 2 years ago, we started what's called the Mobile Rural Depot Program. And we look at the 100 worst municipalities or poorest municipalities across the country. And we are starting to roll out depots in those areas where we take food at scheduled times once a month to all those roughly 28 different rural communities across the country. And we slowly but surely increasing that amount. We also have what's called the Household Food Security Program, where we pack food parcels for very specific identified individuals. And these individuals are identified either by the Department of Health, nurses, dietitians in clinics across the Western Cape. And we're busy rolling out that out in other provinces, or beneficiary organizations that have social workers, social auxiliary workers, community health workers that are able to go into communities, assess families, and we provide food directly to those families in need. We also operate a school breakfast program in partnership with Kellogg's Foundation and Pioneer Foundation or PepsiCo Foundation, where we're supporting 50,000 learners across the country with school meals, as well as in identified creches. And we've got our own accredited supply chain youth internship, where we take in interns across the country. And once they completed their 6-month internship, we provide them with employment. We support roughly 1,500 registered beneficiary organizations with food each month, and together, collectively, they're reaching roughly 700,000 people across the wagon wheel of those various types of categories you see on the right-hand side. So how much food is lost or wasted each year? The research tells us, and these are 2013 studies from the CSIR, that roughly 10 million tons of food is lost or wasted annually, and that costs our economy roughly just more than 70 billion rand on an annual basis. And the pictures you see there are actual pictures of the food that we have recovered from our supply chain partners. As you can see, there's nothing wrong with it. It's not out of date. It's not rotten food. It's well within date, beautiful food, but it's fine. It's just surplus in the supply chain. Where does the food waste occur? Roughly 26% of that occurs on the agricultural production side, so on farms. 24% on post-harvest handling and storage, so pack houses and goods being prepared, prepared foods. Roughly 25% on the processing and packaging side, 20% on the distribution and retail side, and only 5% on the household side. So most of our food loss and waste is occurring on the pre-consumer side. What is the potential of surplus food recovery in South Africa to address food insecurity? So what we did was, of that 20 million tons, if we are just able to recover 5 million tons of food, we are able to provide roughly 20 billion meals on an annual basis, translating into 56 million meals daily. So we just with 50% being able to be recovered, we are able to address food insecurity and the problem comprehensively. With the surplus food we collected last financial year, this is our impact stats. So we were able to collect 7,200 tons of food, translating into 29 million meals. And that cost per meal is only 85 cents because all the food is donated. And all that required from us is to set up the logistics and warehousing network to connect where the food is to the people that need the food. We support 1,500 registered beneficiary organizations every month with food, reaching, as I said, roughly 700,000 people. And there's a beautiful stat there on the end, what we call the social return and investment impact study, which was concluded and I'll share more bit about that later. And what that tells us is not only are we addressing food insecurity and short-term hunger, but the organizations we support are focusing on education, skills development, youth, and women. And because of that, our food banking model generates 98 rands worth of social return for every 1 rand donated into our organization, which is quite a good return on investment. So why is food banking so beneficial? Number one, it's economical. The cost per meal is only 85 cents. It's sustainable. We're able to use good quality surplus food to feed people. The social impact is measurable. Surplus food strategies strengthen existing programs and reduce the cost of having to procure food, which the study found. Roughly 75% of our beneficiary organizations focus on education, vulnerable children, women, and youth. And more than 90% of the food that we recover is nutritious food. And of course, it's environmentally friendly. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'll hand back to you, Refilwe.
Thank you so much for that, Andy. That was very insightful, and you have such a huge network actually going across the different provinces and such. But I quickly wanted to ask you a question in terms of the different provinces that you operate in. How do you identify which areas to go to?
So mostly our model is reactive in that we receive applications onto our platform. Our platform is based on our website, and people can apply there. Organizations, rather registered nonprofit organizations, can apply there. So that's one way, and the most, I suppose, the largest way that we support food organizations with food. But one of the other ways we look at is where are the pockets that where food support is missing, and then we will approach organizations directly and say, you know, would you like to partner with us? We see there's a need in this community. Do you have the capacity to support more people through support from our organization? And so we use both mechanisms. And of course, we look at the 100 poorest municipalities, and we see where what kind of support we need to provide in rural communities that are severely underserved.
All right. Okay, thank you for that. And Simone, I just wanted to quickly find out from you, what is, from your studies, what is food waste? How much of food is actually being wasted?
Thanks, Refilwe, and lovely to see the incredible work you're doing, Andy. So basically, food waste is any food or inedible parts of food that are removed from the supply chain, and that can either that waste can either be disposed of, so go to landfill or discarded at sea, or recovered, which is obviously the better solution through composting or extraction of biogas and so on. But in South Africa, as Andy mentioned, you know, 1/3 of our food goes to waste, and because we are a net exporter of food, that means that actually up to 45% of the available food in our system goes to waste. And of that, it's estimated around 90% goes to landfill. And globally, the figures are quite similar. It's around 1/3 of all food globally produced that is wasted. And this really has a triple negative effect. You know, because that food is removed from the supply chain, it contributes to food insecurity. But then also all the resources that have gone into to produce that food, water, energy, nutrients in the land, those go to waste at the same time. And then finally, when food is discarded in landfill and decomposes, it produces a huge amount of greenhouse gas emissions, maybe up to, I think, 8% of the total global amount of greenhouse gas emissions, so contributes to climate change.
My goodness. For me, most of the time when we see how much food is being wasted, we think it's only vegetables and fruits, and it turns out that that is not the case. Simone?
No, so yeah, the food is wasted across various categories, and there's actually quite a recent study by the CSIR. I'll put a link into the chat that shows what types of foods, sort of grains and cereals and so on, what amount goes to waste at what point in the food supply chain. So yes, it is across the board, and even livestock meat waste, which is very difficult to deal with. So yeah.
All right. Okay. Thanks for that. And Harmony, now, can you tell us a little bit more about the Food Relief program that you're running?
Morning. Thanks. Yeah, the program started during COVID. So it was a coalition with a lot of different organizations that were delivering food to informal settlements and township. But then Seriti took it on their own to start their own community response, which we call it CR19 as community response, to assist, the informal settlement communities and townships, as we saw that there's a need. But through that as well, it's not about food relief only, but it's trying to move people from being, relief to resilience, so that people can be able to sustain themselves through a program that I will talk about it later on. But the aim of the community respond is just to assist those vulnerable communities delivering food, and we're doing that through partnerships with other organizations, as you cannot do it as one organization to different locations. You got to find partners who they will be able to connect you through these vulnerable households, as it's more easier if you have got partnerships through the communities, as they will assist you in identifying these vulnerable households and organizing them in order for smooth deliveries like that.
All right. Okay. Thanks for that. Andy, I know that community response has worked or does work with you. And now I'm wondering if at all the work that community response is doing and the work that Food Forward is doing, do we find that we're somehow trying to close the gap? Are we winning at and closing the gap between the gap of food insecurity?
I think we've made good progress.
I think you're on mute. Now you're okay.
Yeah. I think we've made good progress in the last few years, but COVID has set things back quite significantly. Our economy has shrunk significantly. People have lost jobs. There are not as many income opportunities. But I think what we need to do better, as Simone indicated, is we need to find where in the supply chain there are opportunities where we can recover more food before it is lost or wasted. And once we have that food recovered, we are able to connect more beneficiary organizations. As my sons showed earlier, that if we just were able to recover 50% of that food that's lost or wasted, we can provide 20 billion meals on an annual basis. In other words, it's within our reach to be able to address the problem of hunger for good in South Africa. As you may know, roughly 27% of children aged up to 5 years old suffer from severe malnutrition, a malnutrition-related disease called stunting, where they are too short for their age and they develop poor immune systems, and they are more prone to injuries and illnesses and diseases. And this is in a country where South Africa has a net surplus of food. So we have more than enough of food in the country. We need to do better to make sure that throughout the supply chain, that where we have supply chain disruptions, whether it's because of COVID, whether it's because of other issues throughout the supply chain, once we are able to recover more and more of that food, we are able to support more organizations that Harmony is involved in, and we're able to spread that more broadly. As I indicated, the research shows that roughly 30 million people are food insecure, severely food insecure, or moderately food insecure. So it's really something we need to pay serious attention to if we want to address economic growth. It has to start with the provision of food to those that need it.
Awesome, thanks, Andy. And now this could be a little bit of a tricky question, Simone, but I'm wondering, right? From production, from the farmers to until the food makes it to the shelf. At any process, is there at any point where people are cognizant of the fact that we are producing for consumption, or the production process is actually taking place for financial reasons, so much so that we end up having this situation where farmers produce for money, retailers buy, and they buy to go and sell, and nowhere in the consumer side, in the production side, nowhere is there a feature where you know what, we're actually producing to feed people, and maybe we wouldn't be having a situation of food insecurity.
Yeah, that's definitely a tricky question, Refilwe. I think it's a big question. And it goes to, I think what Andy was saying about, it's across the whole value chain, and that's how our food system is structured. As you say, there's certain, we produce for profit or whatever it may be, but there's a structural side to our food system that needs to be shifted. And that's going to require a range of interventions because of the loss at the different stages along the value chain. So, for example, we need structural interventions to increase collection and recovery, to increase separation at source. Then if we look at the transport side of our food system, food actually travels an enormous distance often to get to us as the consumers. And along the way, food gets bruised, there's cold chain supply failures and so on. So there, one intervention could be to support local producers and really try and localize our food systems, creating access to market for small or medium scale suppliers. And then, even if we look at retailers' policy, there's been a lot of campaigns around retailers accepting ugly foods, so the skew carrots and the squiff cucumbers and so on. So allowing that food into their system and into their stores. There's a lot that can be done around optimizing ordering systems, so ensuring that there is no surplus, in the stores, as Andy spoke about. And then other small things like retailers could take their sell-by food and turn it into ready-made meals, so it then has another life in a way. And then I guess all the way from the huge commercial agricultural farmers down to us as individuals, there needs to be an increased awareness and behavior change, even us and how we and so on. And I think I actually put a link into the chat on a report that WWF did, which I think, they use some very real kind of examples which help me as an individual to understand the impact of food waste. So, for example, if you leave one bite of steak on your plate, it's the same as running your dishwasher 22 times. Or if you leave half of your hamburger and eat it and throw it away, it's the same as taking a 1-hour shower. So it's that kind of awareness as well that we need to go across the entire value chain all the way to individuals. I hope that answers your tricky question.
I think you did, because now you just roped me into it, where now I must be cautious of the fact that when I eat, I must be careful of what I'm doing. When I go by, I must also be careful of just knowing that I'm making a contribution towards the situation that we have. So
100%. I think that's such a good response to that, because obviously, we see that the most of the food waste happens, the production stage, but there's so much that we can do as individuals, not only in our own habits at home, but also even what food we choose to buy and how much of it we choose to buy. And that really starts to shift the demand in the system.
Awesome. Thank you. Harmony, I'm wondering, because I know Andy explained to us earlier on about how they go about identifying vulnerable families, and that's primarily through community-based organizations. And I just needed to check with you, with the CR19, how do you then identify families?
So, Rachel, as I've said, so the CR19 project, as I'm saying, it works in informal settlement. So we've been working across different provinces like Gauteng, Mpumalanga, Limpopo, and the Northwest. So through that, we've got our Seriti partners, where we've got a lot of organizations that partners with Seriti. And then through that, that's where we identify communities that they need, the food relief. And through that, so we send them a beneficiary list just to say where the people are situated, how many in a household, so that give us an idea of how much of food parcels you need to give to a family. As you know, with our Black culture, to say in one family there can be a lot of kids, maybe 4 to 8 in a family. So you need to understand how much of food parcels will sustain them for a certain period. So, but as I'm saying, through this CR19, we've already been delivering about 8,121 food households, that we've given to across Limpopo, Gauteng, Mpumalanga, and Northwest. But our aim as well, it's trying to move people from getting food relief, trying to working towards community where they can start their own food gardens, that will enable, food self-sufficiency for them. Because sometimes you give them food passes, you don't know how long it will last them for. Maybe you give them something that will only last them for a month. What will happen the other month? So we're starting a program. We have started a program that is called Work, Learn, Grow, where communities kind of start their own household gardens or backyard gardens. It can be in a school where you can say it's a communal garden. So we take them through a training, and through that we supply them with all surplus, seedlings, seeds, where they start their own gardens and getting fresh produce from their house. As today, if going to the shop, it's so expensive to buy a bunch of spinach. But what if you just wake up and have it next to your house? It saves you a lot of money, and it saves you a lot of time. So that's what we're trying to shift people from, just not being relieved to be resilient, to start their own food garden. And also it will start them having their own enterprises as well, starting their own farming as well, to strengthen the local farmers or agriculture in our communities.
Yeah, that's very important, because then you move vulnerable families from being dependent on food relief systems to a point where now that money that I could have used to buy porridge, I can now use, I can just now maybe keep it, because now I've got spinach, I've got this and that in the yard that I can use money for other things. Thank you for that.
To buy other things, yeah.
Yeah, and Andy, I know in your presentation you mentioned something about date labeling issues. What is going on there when this food ends up being wasted?
So date labeling is a major issue in South Africa. In fact, worldwide, it's a big issue. And I know people in the United States, people across Europe are really trying to relook at how we approach date labeling issues, because it's one of the huge contributors to food waste. For example, peanut butter, jar of peanut butter, the shelf life on there, mandatory shelf life has to be on there according to the Food Act standards, and they put 1 year. But we know for a fact that peanut butter lasts for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. A lot of canned goods as well have longer shelf life than what are stated on, because what's stated on in terms of date labeling is just the shortest, safest date, just to be safe, to be food safe. But we know for a fact that a lot of that food is good for human consumption, even past those expiry dates or best before dates. But because the Food Act requires a certain framework and how food actors in the supply chain have to use that food and sell that food by, they have to, when it reaches close to those expiry dates or best before dates, they have to take it off their shelf, and they either dump it in landfill or they incinerate that stock. And we're actually talking about a lot of food. We're talking about millions of tons of food that are lost or wasted because of date labeling issues. So we are aware through our partnership with the Consumer Goods Council of South Africa that the Department of Health, together with the Department of Trade and Industry, are looking at this issue. But I think we are a long ways off from seeing something that is usable, that will contribute to a significantly amount reduced food loss and waste scenario.
Awesome. All right. So I shouldn't just readily throw something away just because it says that it's expiring now. Yeah, because then the lifespan is a bit longer.
Absolutely, without a doubt. And consumers have to just be aware. Open the packaging, smell it, taste it before it is used. But like I said, most of that surplus is occurring on the pre-consumer side throughout the supply chain. So that's where we really need to tackle the problem, especially on the manufacturing side and on the retail and wholesale side of things.
All right. Okay. Thanks for that, Andy. Simone, I just need to check with you if you think the corporations that are contributing towards food waste, do you think they're cooperative in terms of trying to get the amount of food wasted to be provided to people or families that do not have sustainable food or food?
Yeah, well, I think corporations is quite specific, and I think if we look at food forward, we see that many of our retailers are starting to shift towards donating and trying to address the problem. Yeah, we also see, I think there's really a growing awareness within the country around this problem. We're seeing new legislation in Cape Town around organic waste and separating at source. We know that Operation Pakisa, part of the work there under chemicals and wastes, will include a green bag so that we can separate at the household level. So I think there's definitely, we are starting to see momentum in this area. The Consumer Goods Council, which Andy mentioned, have recently put together a voluntary agreement, which some of our major retailers have signed on to. So yes, definitely, I think we are starting to see a shift. But as I said before, we're going to need quite a few different interventions at multiple points, and particularly, as Andy just mentioned, at the policy space around some of those acts and legislations.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I'm happy to hear that there is movement towards the right direction. It would be interesting to see what influences these movements are going to have on policies and in actually making a difference in people's lives,
Yeah, definitely. And I think, we mentioned the pandemic earlier, and I think we see quite a wonderful trend globally. And if we look at South Africa's reconstruction and recovery plan, it's a real strong focus on green sectors. So, green economy, water security, food security, tourism, and so on. And so I think these kind of plans and how we build back better and build back greener from the pandemic are going to open and allow space for SMMEs and entrepreneurs and innovators to start building enterprises in these areas that are environmentally sustainable and green.
Yeah. I think that is going to be fascinating. I'm going to certainly keep a close eye on the developments in this space. But I just quickly need to check with Andy, and this is alluding to one of the things that you said earlier on, that consumers need to be aware of their contribution towards food waste. How do we make consumers aware?
So there are a few recommendations that consumers can use to be aware of. The first is consumers are more and more aware of date labeling issues. And like I said, it's important that they not only look at the date, but they actually open the packaging, smell it, taste it, and see whether the food is good for human consumption. Another thing that they should be focusing on is also purchasing less. They go to the supermarket and they've got a special at the supermarket on potatoes and onions, and they use these massive big bags, and they buy them because they are on special. But when they bring them home after a week or 2 weeks, things start to go rotten. So buy only what you need for a few days or for a week at a time. Purchase less. And also support the local economy, support local farmers, support local livestock farmers, buy local as much as possible, buy fresh as much as possible, only buy what you need to consume for a few days and then top that up after a few days. Don't fill your fridge to capacity. If you need to, buy a smaller fridge instead, and focus more on being sustainable, being aware of your footprint on the environment, and how our actions actually cause a chain reaction throughout the supply chain equation.
Yeah. And I also find it that it's very important for us to be aware of this. And had I not been sitting here today, I don't think I would have known that I'm actually playing a very significant role in this whole situation. I just quickly want to check with Harmony. In terms of nutrition, the food that is provided to the to vulnerable families, do you find that it's good, nutritious food?
Yes, Refilo. But sometimes with as we get donations from different organizations, sometimes you find that it's some of the food is just mealy meal, tin stuff. But what we do as well, we buy local fresh produce, from local farmers to add into that, because that also it sustains them a bit. But most of the food, yes, we try and keep it nutritious, and that's why we're saying with Work and Grow, it assists them as well. Even if you get a meal only, that on your backyard you've got your small garden that you can just wake up in the morning, get onions, get spinach or cabbage, which helps you into that. But yes, so what we're trying to do as well is just trying to keep everything nutritious, as you need that. And as Andy was saying, to people, that they must support their local farmers, which is what we always emphasize to communities. Buy through your local farmers, because you're assisting them as well, and you're assisting yourself. It saves you transport, it saves you time. That money that you can use, that you save, you can use it for other things. So I think buying locally should be the way to go now, than just to go to a shop and go through buying these huge bags where it will only last you for a week, because it will get rotten. So buy whatever you need for that moment, and start your own produce from your household or communities. So all we need now is just being partners, working together in local communities.
Awesome. All right. Okay. Thank you for that. And you touched on the effects of food insecurities and food insecurity and the effects that it has on children earlier on. But how bad is it? What are the effects really on families that are food insecure?
We work quite closely with the Department of Health, so we keenly, and we read the reports of, for example, the SA Health Review report, the household studies reports, the NIDSCRAM reports, National Institute for Dynamic Studies, coronavirus report, and others, and all are pointing to a few things. Number one, 27.4% of children up to the ages of 5 years are stunted, which is a severe malnutrition-related disease. The second thing is we've got a severe problem of maternal malnutrition. In other words, mothers that are pregnant or giving birth, they are underweight themselves because they don't have enough food. We also know from statistics that 33% of our children up until school-going, high school age children, are not receiving proper nutrition. So, starting food gardens is a great first step. But children especially, need a variety of food ingredients to be able to maintain proper nutrition so that they support a healthy immune system. But what we're finding in South Africa is that a large group of our population have ill health, and it's overburdening our health system, specifically because our children are not getting the proper nutrition they need. Now, once a child reaches 6 years of age, you can't reverse that issue around stunting. So we have to make sure that in that first 1,000 days, which is what the Department of Health proposes, that first 1,000 days, we make sure that we provide them with the proper nutrition they need. But we need to do better at finding where those households are. We know roughly 5 million households on a monthly basis are food insecure or at risk, and we need to make sure that we get food to those vulnerable groups. Our household food security program, where we work with the Department of Health's various clinics across the province in the Western Cape, and we are moving to the Northwest and KZN, which is the highest incidences of child malnutrition and maternal malnutrition in the country, to make sure that through their networks, through the clinics, through social workers, through dietitians, that we make sure we find where those children are, so that we can make sure we give them a nutritious pack to ensure that we reverse this trend of child malnutrition. Because those children that fall through the net, throughout their whole life, they will be compromised, immunocompromised. They will be short for their age. They can't participate well in sport. They are prone to injuries. And also cognitive development is limited because of that. So we have to make sure that at the household level, those interventions are sought so that women and children are cared for as best we can.
And the problem here is that the lack of food access will have long-term effects on children, and it affects them throughout the rest of their lives. Simone, I just wanted to quickly check with you if at all you think that we're going to get to a place where we are closing this gap now, and how long do you think we'll eventually get there?
Well, as an optimist, yes, we will get there, and we need to get there if we're going to address some of our such serious social issues that Andy was just speaking about, but also, to address climate change, we need to move very quickly and have big transformative actions. So most certainly, I think we're going to get there. I've got no idea how to answer how long it will take, but I think we need, more and more people who are working in the space and so on. We at UNDP, we are responsible for convening the Sustainable Development Goals, and the SDGs are up until 2030. And by then, SDG 12, which is sustainable consumption and production, the target 12.3, we need to halve our food waste by 2030, which is an enormous task considering where we are right now. But I do believe that, if we take a whole of society approach, where all of us as individuals, as retailers, as come together to solve these issues, we can do it, and we must.
Yeah, very important that we do. Andy, I just also wanted to check with you, because you spoke about our footprint earlier on, and I'm now thinking about the packaging of some foods. You find that it's plastic, and now this food ends up being wasted. What effects do you think the amount of food that is being lost and it's mainly packaged with plastic, do you think we have on the environment?
I think we have a very severe effect on the environment. There's still today a huge dependency on plastics for packaging, because other suitable alternatives are either just not there yet, or it is still way too expensive, and then that cost will just pass on to the consumer. So I think we are a long way off. However, there is a greater awareness among people in the supply chain that they need to move more towards environmentally friendly packaging. And I think more and more new technologies are coming to the fore that will be able to assist into the future. But as it stands today, there is still a huge dependency on single-use plastics, especially, you buy a 2-liter milk in the plastic. When you're done with it, you throw it away. And that's got to go somewhere. And I think we need to do better in this space. We need to look at more innovative ways of how we can package goods, and cost-effective ways, because goods are already expensive. Harmony explained earlier, when they go shopping, they have to be keenly aware of the food they buy because it's so expensive. And that's one of the reasons why we have food insecurity, because the nutritious food that everybody needs to grow and live is out of the reach of half of our South African population, because they just can't afford it. So you can't pass that cost on to the consumer. We need to find more innovative ways of packaging goods. And again, one way to do that is to buy local. Then you don't need this intricate and sophisticated and costly packaging requirements. It can be simple because you're picking it up from your local farmer and you're taking it to be used immediately or put in the fridge or whatever the case may be. So we need to do better on that front. We're far from where we need to be.
All right, thanks, Andy, for that. Simone, I see your hand is up.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to build on what Andy was saying, is that, we feel that we really need to shift from this make waste linear economy to a much more circular economy. If we look at natural systems, there's no such thing as waste. The natural systems are regenerative. And so we need to start designing a system where waste is actually designed out of the system. And we at UNDP, we see so much opportunity here because, South Africa produces 111 megatons of waste per year, 75% of which goes to landfill. And that waste can contribute to a circular economy. It can be a resource for so much development. So what we're doing in that space, and to your previous question as well around kind of trying to grow the number of actors working on these issues, is that we're supporting entrepreneurs and innovators with enterprise development. And so, for example, some of the solutions that we've been supporting this year is so taking food waste and composting it, or using vermiculture. So you start producing really high value fertilizers so that, and you start replenishing your soils. We also have research projects underway to look at how we can draw biogas from food waste, how we can dehydrate food with solar panels. So there really are a lot of incredible existing solutions that we can support and scale and replicate. And it starts to then grow and address this across the system. And we also then have a 5-year program on the circular economy starting next year, where we'll start to work more broadly than food waste, but also looking at plastics and other organic waste. And as I say, this really, it's an unused resource where we see it as waste, but it can contribute a huge amount to a building block for enterprises.
Awesome. All right. Okay. Thanks for that, Simone. Andy, and this is just quickly taking us in terms of numbers so that we're cognizant of the fact that this is, we could be bridging the gap. You said earlier on that we have more than 30 people that are food insecure in our country. And this is it people even, or is it families for that matter? And you said that this was from the study that was conducted in 2013. And obviously now with COVID, the situation is worse.
Yeah, so the United Nations recently released a report in September on food waste and loss, show that in South Africa, although we're not on track to meet our 2030 SDGs, especially SDG 1, 2, and 12, especially 12.3, roughly 26.4 million people are food insecure. Of that 26.4 million, more than 12 million of those people are severely undernourished. And those are real numbers. You know, prior to COVID-19, we had a food security crisis. The Oxfam report showed that 14 million people were food insecure in their 2018 report. And COVID and the pandemic has exacerbated that. So that 30 million people are mostly women that are vulnerable, and children, especially children in child-headed households, and children suffering from stunting and other malnutrition related diseases. So that's where the real problem is. It translates into roughly 5 million households that are severely undernourished across South Africa. Now, when you think about that and you consider what happened in KZN with the riots in July. Now, in no way were those riots other than criminality, no doubt about it. But we have to ask ourselves, with millions of people unemployed and with people severely vulnerable, you know, what opportunities are there for them to secure food for their families? To go to bed every night without food and to do that over months has a severe detrimental effect on people's wellness. You know, where I live, there's a school nearby, and kids were on their way to school, and I was outside taking out the wheelie bin, and 4 kids, siblings, stopped me and said, "Uncle, don't you have food for us?" Now that was 8 o'clock in the morning, which indicates that those children didn't have any food last night to eat, or that morning for breakfast. So in terms of schools, they're getting the 1 meal at the school nutrition program, hopefully. But other than that, they know when they go home, there is no food. And this is a stark reality that we have to address first. If we want our economy to grow, we need people to eat the right amounts of diverse foods to build their nutrition so that they can be strong enough to go look for work, strong enough to stay out of the health system, and strong enough to sustain jobs for themselves or earn a living for themselves.
All right, thanks, Andy, for that. I just also wanted to check that for me to be able to contribute or to alleviate the situation in terms of both food waste and food insecurity, would I be required at any point? Because now I'm aware of the fact that I shouldn't overbuy or I shouldn't overpurchase when I'm buying my groceries, and I should be mindful of the expiry date and know that now it's not going to expire on the set date. But does it get to a point where now, if I wanted to play a role in alleviating the situation, do I need to change my diet at all? Simone.
Sense, one of the biggest impact is to eat a plant-based diet. So to reduce
Simone, your connection is not clear there. And do you
consumption.
Sorry? Okay, let's just give you a moment. Meanwhile, Andy jumps in, and then we'll come back to you just now.
I think maybe, I'm not sure what Simone was going to say, but I think one of the things that you need to do, or we all need to do, is we don't need to change our diet. We must change our behavior. That's important. We are huge consumers of meat and meat products, as Simone was going to say. And we need to reduce that because it has a huge detrimental effect on our land and the nutrients in our soil. So behavior needs to change with every one of us. And if we change behavior in our homes and we change behavior at our workplaces, we can start to shift things and move the needle in a more positive direction, certainly. I think Simone is okay to go, so I'm going to hand over to Simone.
All right, thanks, Andy.
Can you hear me? Apologies, I'm in quite a rural area.
You're quite clear now.
Okay, wonderful. Actually, Andy, thank you. I was going to say something very similar to that, but I also do think that we can shift our diets to more of a plant-based diet. As you said, the livestock has, of the greenhouse gas emissions that sort of the food system produces, livestock is up to 70% of that. And there's a huge amount of knock-on effect to that. So for example, the majority of deforestation that happens is to grow soya and other protein-derived plants to feed to our livestock. So I think as an individual, a big contribution we can make is to reduce our consumption of meat. I think Andy covered the rest. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much. We just left with 2 minutes before we end. I just wanted you to have your parting words, and maybe we could start with Harmony.
Thank you so much, Rafila, and thanks to Andy and Simone for the lovely insight. Yeah, I think parting words from my side is that we should work together as to collaborate in assisting all these informal settlements. As we know, a government, we cannot rely on the government each and every day. Some other families can't get food parcels or it cannot reach them. But we as other organizations can make sure that people go to bed with some food, and also teach them, the awareness of nutrition, starting a garden, buy locally, only go to a shop and buy what you need, not what it's there for you, but save money and teach youth and mothers, starting food gardens and a lot of collaboration in the local communities as well. I think that will reduce a lot of things, as Andy was saying, for us to change our mindset as well. Not saying don't eat meat, but just be aware of all the circumstances that we're going through, because COVID looting has made a lot of things so expensive. So we need to be cognizant of that we need to start our own gardens. So Refilo, you need to start your own garden as well,
All right, thanks, Harmony. Simone, you can go.
Well, Refilo, as Harmony's put you on the spot, I'll also just tell you that there are a lot of modular worm farms available now, which you can buy for your own home too. So there are solutions. There are really solutions. Another very interesting organization to look at is Compost Kitchen. They collect your food waste from your house and bring back the fertilizer to you once they've converted it. So I think supporting these local entrepreneurs is also a great way. And for parting words, I wanted to just touch on waste in general, not just food waste. We have, as humans, this amazing ability to disconnect. As soon as something goes in a dustbin, it doesn't exist anymore. And as Andy said earlier, it goes somewhere. All the waste that we produce, everything we put in that dustbin is going somewhere. And if you just increase your awareness around that, it helps for us to reduce our own waste as individuals. So thank you so much for having me today.
Awesome. All right. And thank you for that, Simone. Andy, last words?
Thank you very much, Refilo. I think just 3 thoughts from my side. The first is, it's well within our ability to be able to address the problem of food loss and waste in South Africa. And at this point, I want to make a call out to to people, actors in the supply chain, throughout the supply chain that are not yet participating. For example, the CGCSA's voluntary agreements. We need more people to sign up and make commitments towards reducing food loss and waste would be my second comment. And my third comment is, we constantly call on government to relook and develop policies around surplus food donations. We need a policy to govern liability protection, and we need government to take the lead here. We don't expect government to use money to feed people, but we do expect government to create an enabling environment to reduce food loss and waste, to create a policy environment where it makes it safe for under certain conditions, donors to donate food, so that we can create even more of these sub-economies that Simone mentioned. One of the things we do with a farmer that donates surplus tomatoes to us, we make tomato jam. And that way we're able to donate that product to beneficiary organizations, and more of these economies can be developed as more and more surpluses are being able to be recovered. So the solutions are well within our ability to be able to deal with. We just need to work better at connecting the dots.
Awesome. Thank you, Andy. There's a lot of innovative stuff going on right there. I mean, I wouldn't have imagined that your simple things like your tomatoes end up being produced just for the simple being, end up going through a different kind of production, just for the simple fact that we're trying to close the gap of food waste. Thank you so much to all of you, the panelists, and thank you to everybody that attended today's discussion. I will upload this discussion on all our social media networks and ensure that you'll be able to watch it. We will let you know when the next Seriti Talks will be taking place. But in the meantime, take care. Thank you.